Hi everybody, welcome to the Stratosphere Studio. On our second attempt here, we lost signal, a loss of signal. Uh, Spacecraft lost its lock on Earth, and the radio antenna was basically just spinning around. We managed to catch it, fortunately stabilized the rotation here at the Stratosphere Studio, and it looks like we're back in business. But it went out on Twitch and apparently went out on YouTube as well. So I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. So anyway, I did get a lot done since last time. I got the suits pretty much the way I like them. I'm pretty happy with the metahuman faces. The metahuman animator 2 is very good. It's better. It's much better than the earlier one. To really do it right, apparently it needs an iPhone 13 or 14, which I don't have. And what I've been working on all day, or really for the last week and on and off, is to get something that just looks more or less like I can have something to give you an idea of what the final product's going to look like. So that's what I got. And I was hoping to get facial animation in there today, but like I said, they changed how they recorded it, and it's just not, just didn't happen today. So it's going to look a little flat. The thing that really sells this stuff is I was just trying to get just some eye movement and some lip movement. Wasn't trying anything fancy. Just couldn't get it done before it was time to roll with this thing. But on the other hand, we do have a a video to show. So I'm just gonna play it, and here we go. This is a lighting test, by the way. So I thought that was actually not too bad. There's a lot of stuff to finesse on the lighting and all the rest of it. The colors on the suits are crazy saturated, but I actually kind of like that. The faces I think are good. I did a decent amount of backstory on these 4 characters, and I'm having major problems with my voice today. Thank you very much. Eric says they look like bosses, and Dave Big Booty said they're walking like men who have work to do. Exactly. So I just really raced to get that done before the show today. Actually, I wish I could grab a frame. I can't. So what I'll do is I'll just kind of talk over it for a little bit. And so here we go again. So like I said, I did some backstory work on these guys and trying to figure out, a little bit more about who they were. So Major Mace Mattingly has to be a major. That means, anything but the Navy. So I'm going to have Major Mace Mattingly be an Air Force major. He's the mission commander, base commander, and I think he probably flew F-100s before he took this moon mission. The guy in yellow there is Doug Davenport, I think. Guy in yellow he's my angry voice. He's going to be the one that's just constantly, just cycle this again, hang on. Guy in yellow is the guy who I'm going to have be kind of cranky and cantankerous, just like me. He's going to be the one who's going to be saying, oh, you know what, everything's just going to hell down there. And then Major Mace Mattingly can kind of, calm things down. So Mattingly's an Air Force major. That would make the guy in yellow, this guy, Doug Davenport, that would make him a lieutenant commander. He's not a pilot. He gets very upset when people call him a pilot. he's the mission pilot, but he is, of course, a naval aviator, and that doesn't that's not something he really likes being called. The guy in blue is Jeff Gordon. They call him Gordo. Kind of a smaller guy. He's from the Navy. He's from Naval Reactors, and he's their chief engineer. He's their nuclear power officer, and he's certainly the most quiet of the bunch. So that guy in blue there is Gordo. He's also a lieutenant commander. He's the reactor specialist, but he's also the chief engineer, and in terms of keeping the station running theoretically. And finally, the guy in red would be. I have to keep jumping back to this to restart the movie. The guy in red would be Steve Sinclair, probably Master Sergeant Steve Sinclair. Gave a lot of thought to whether or not they would have an enlisted man up there, and I just decided I liked it. And like I said, it's kind of Major Matt Mason-y. So Sinclair is the actual build-it guy. And the reason that they all have identical walk cycles, as Time Bear points this out, is because up until about 4.5 minutes before I recorded this, I was still dropping these things on here. And the other ones that I had just worked for a while, and then they didn't. So there you go. And so I actually gave some thought originally to doing one guy from the Air Force, one from the Navy, one from the Army, and one from the Marine Corps, but I just couldn't square it. So the guy in white, Major Mace Mattingly, is Air Force. The guy in red, I think, is going to be a Marine Sergeant or an Air Force Sergeant, maybe Technical Sergeant for the, probably Air Force Master Sergeant. Guy in blue is a Naval Commander from Naval Reactors, and the guy in yellow is their primary pilot. Naval Aviator. So that's getting that. I don't think I've ever shown this footage without somebody saying I should get Zoe to do the voice for this, and I don't think I've ever not said that I cannot do that because the voices have to be recorded at the same time as the facial animation, and that has to be recorded here. So I keep seeing it, and it's just not going to happen. So that's that. How many weeks so far, and we're only at lighting tests? I don't know, Bart. I think it's probably better part of 2 or 3 months. That's kind of what life has been like for me for the last 2 or 3 months. It's been racing and racing and racing, running faster and faster and faster to try and catch the tail end of a train that is moving away quicker than I can catch it. So that's what my life is like right now, and that's what it feels like, and that's why it's taken so long. I mean, I just don't know what else to say. I'm here. I'm here weekends. I'm here till 10 or 11 at night, and this is all I can do by myself. So I'm going as fast as my little feet will carry me. And believe me, I don't think there's a day that goes by when I'm not constantly just screaming at myself on how long this takes. I know it's taken forever, and I get to a point where I've got it down. I can finally do this. So it's like, nope. No. Now you're going to have to stop here, and you're going to have to spend 4 days working on this thing. And then you're going to get a half a day's worth of work done. You're going to have to stop, and you're going to have to work on this thing. And it's just really demoralizing because all of the enthusiasm, that you have for getting this thing done is just bled off by all these technical issues that just shouldn't be there. They just shouldn't happen. None of this stuff should happen. It just does. Wow. Thank you, Silver Stalker, with a $50 super chat. Here's some dollars for coffee and lozenges. Love your content. I'm getting a lot of hate for chastising those that still want to take their kids to Disney. They shelved this movie. How many kids might have been saved? I don't know what that is. I don't know who possibly could be who could still be giving you grief about not taking your kids to Disney. I mean, just Disney has gone. I just can't even. I just can't even say the word anymore, honestly. So. That's that. So let's see if we can get through some questions today. Oops. Hang on, I'm getting there as fast as I can. Okay, here we go. Just looking at what we got here. Oh, we got a bunch of questions. See if we can get to them. All of a sudden, we're seeing a avatar from Ray Juarez. I think he's got 4 questions in here. It's good to see you, Ray. Thank you very much for the questions, and it's always nice to see new people in the forum. And he's also helping to curate it, so thank you. So here's a question from Ray Suarez. Hello, Mr. Whittle. Hello, Ray. Please call me Bill. I have 2 questions. This is the one I'm more invested in. Feel free to skip my second one unless you have time and have answered anyone else's questions first. Question, when in more casual conversation like at work, how would you go about providing criticisms or praise for movies that you think are bad or are good, as well as political conversations? I'm a poor conversationalist, but I want to get better at voicing points in a way that is not preachy. What a profound question that is. It's a really, really excellent question. Boy, I don't even know where to start on that one. The entire reason of having this whole entertainment aspect of it is to defang the political aspect of it. People are so deep in their trenches now. Everybody is so ammoed up and dug in and seeing red politically. Smoke's coming out of everybody's ears. This is all intentional. I'm not going to get into the politics of that on the Monday night show, but the entire idea of doing something other than me standing there and telling people things is to not only reach people who we might not have reached before for no other reason than the eye candy, but also to get around the algorithm, but also to take the message someplace that feels like neutral ground. I'm still going for the win. I'm still going to be, my objective is exactly the same as it would be if I was doing a firewall or whatever the case may be. I'm just trying to find a way to sneak past the defenses, not just the technological defenses that they put up to make sure that young people and others don't get to hear any other opinion than the one they want. But also, even if they do get a chance to see it, especially if they get a chance to see it, you have to, I want to do something that is, at least on the surface, funny enough and neutral enough, and playful is the word I'm looking for. Playful enough so that you can sneak a discussion in there without it becoming political. When I was talking about the characters a few moments ago, the reason I mentioned that guy in yellow, and the reason he's walking behind everybody else is he's just me in a typical day. He's the kind of guy that's getting the same feed as everybody else, and he's just saying these things are just going to hell in a handbasket, and he's just constantly bitching about things. So I get to get that out of the system, but then I also get to have a different voice in this, which is really, as I told Natasha, it's really her voice, which is you try and see it from their point of view. Seeing something from their point of view doesn't mean agreeing with them, and it certainly doesn't mean changing your mind or lowering your standards. It means just trying to understand what people think is the truth, or what people think is the case, or whatever. And so I decided that I wanted Mattingly to be much more, I'll go with my first impulse on this, more gentle, more disciplined, more fatherly, more reasoned and balanced. You know what? Here's what I want. I want him to be Andy Taylor. Is what I want him to be. I want him to be more than that, but I want him to be that. From Mayberry, from the Andy Griffith Show. So if you have a mitigating voice in there, you can get away with things, at least get them out there without people just smashing the off button and rage quitting, because you're presenting their side of the argument as well. Now, as I told Natasha, we've had this discussion so many times, I have it practically every day. Every time I see something about this or that, I just think, and then she'll say, well, it's just different, and they're different, and they're good at different things. Well, they can't read and they can't. So, look, it's not going to be even-handed. If it was even-handed, there'd be no point in doing it. The entire reason for having this and trying to address your question here is it's an act of disarmament. It's a way for people to just get their defenses down enough so that you can sneak something in there. And if you can do it with humor, then the objective I've been going for, and I've been going for it for 5 frickin' months now, is I want to be able to say something sharp and funny, because that's my knee-jerk reaction to this stuff. I see these guys doing a fair amount of reaction videos. The trailer line, which I've essentially got all the elements for now. The trailer line is, you see Dylan Mulvaney on the 70s TV, and it's like, see, this is what happens, little boys play with cap guns. So I've seen a lot of things like body cam footage of people being pulled over and just, arguing with the cops. Get out of the car. Why? Because I need to get out of the car right now. Why? You explain to me why. We're not dealing with, you finally run into something that you're not going to talk your way out of here. So with this guy, with Doug, he can just be cantankerous without that's where I'm going, trying to find it. By making one of the characters cantankerous, I can be cantankerous without the entire series being cantankerous. I can have a guy who just likes to bitch about things. And if he's going to be bitching about things, he'd better be clever, and he'd better be competent. He better be really, really good at his job, because that's the only way you can justify this without the character becoming just a drag. Right? So this guy is a Sierra Hotel pilot, and he is just tired of hearing about things like, well, you can't fly without computers. So he's going to go out there and he's going to just show everybody, for the sake of it, what you can do without computers. And he's angry when people say you can't do this without computers, because it's a violation of his entire life. It's It's his entire life is to be a pilot. Now there's, oh, you can't do that without. It makes him angry when he hears that, and he can say some sharp and funny things, and then you can have Mace come in, and oh my goodness, Astronerd said Dr. Smith. No, we will not be having Dr. Smith on this moon base. And then Mace can come in and just not change it, just kind of pat it down just a little bit, just a little bit. Come on, Doug, these guys, it's all they know, it's all they've got. Some of the technologies are just wonderful. So when you start thinking about the kind of points you want to make with this thing politically, yeah, Archie Bunker in space, yeah, I mean, yeah, he's sharper than Archie Bunker. I think probably I'm looking more for like a kind of a Tony Stark kind of a swagger, is what I'm looking for. I think with this guy, with this naval aviator, he's a fighter pilot, and that's what fighter pilots use for birth control is their personalities. So he's going to be that guy. Mace is going to be. I really have high hopes and plans for this, because the writing part of it is going gangbusters in terms of the stories and the scripts and all the other things that I want to do, and I just get so bloody gutted by just again and again and again saying, why is this doing this? Why is this so hard? This software is amazing. This Unreal Engine 5, but to take a metahuman head and put it on another body and have them walk together and do it, it's like Chinese calculus. It's unbelievable. And when you look at the tutorials, it's like, well, you have to do this. You have to go into the blueprint, and check this box here. Great, do that. Okay. Then you have to take this little node in the blueprint, and you have to replace it with this node and set this value to 1. And I'm doing all these things, and I'm thinking, okay, I can do this, but can't you just do it? Can't you just say, I'd like the body to be attached to the head, and so that when the body moves, the head goes with it, and it doesn't, swing around and do all this other stuff. Is that so hard? Apparently it is. So they've done miracles with the vision, and I'm not asking them to make it for idiots, but it seems to me that somebody at Epic should be thinking about how to make this for people who are not game developers, because game developers they just do this without even thinking about it. It's just automatic. But they have a much bigger audience than that, much bigger sales base if they decide to go for it. So anyway, as far as trying to get to your question here, what struck me about the question when I first read it was how do you go about providing criticism and praise for movies that you think are bad or are good, as well as political conversations? So I guess that's where I'm trying to go with this, Ray. I think the entire idea is how can you talk about politics without talking about politics? That's kind of where I'm going. You can tell people things, or you can show them things, and this is it. And I don't for a second mean to compare this in terms of scale, possibility, or anything else. I'm just using it as an example. So it's not like I have delusions of megalomania. But with that said, I don't know how many millions and millions and millions of young men out there how many men there are out there, young men and older boys, who are out there, who the only father figure they have in their entire lives is Master Chief from Halo. I mean, I just keep seeing it. I keep hearing people talking about Master Chief that way, and I'm sure the woke battalions, having destroyed everything else in their path, will find a way to make Master Chief gay or decide to become trans or whatever. And at which point he won't be Master Chief anymore. But that this virtual world is becoming more and more virtual. I'm seeing things like apps and websites where now you can go in there, and this is what they're advertising. You can have AI design you this perfect girlfriend, and that's one thing. Okay, I get how that works. But they're also saying, and she'll be your best friend, and she'll be able to provide the and she's a great conversationalist, I think is the term. So you got to get in there with that. As far as your question about the movies go, good and bad movies, box office doesn't lie. The box office is independent of political bias to a large degree. I mean, there are movies that progressives will go see because of the message, and there's message movies for conservatives, although not nearly as many. But generally speaking, the huge bulk of the middle doesn't really care, unless the politics get too intrusive, at which point they do start to care. So what do we see with these movies in the larger culture, not just over the last couple of days or years, even really over the last practically almost a decade now? What we find is that the more political they try to make movies, the less effective those movies are. And this is something I just hadn't really realized until just this minute, not quite so clearly, that what these progressives have done is, in their orgy to smash that message into you, and their inability to have real life experiences enough to make them into real writers and give the characters they love and give them faults and arcs and all the rest of it. It's actually kind of interesting. What they've done is, as they get more and more and more political, they get less and less and less effective, because we got ourselves into this trouble because Hollywood was able to put extremely liberal messages into films that didn't seem like a liberal message, and were in fact tremendously entertaining. The Easy Rider is, it's an anti-hero movie, and so is Bonnie and Clyde, and so when you have these, there are movies. They become franchises only because the movie is so successful, only because they ring that bell. Right? I don't know. I could probably write 50 pages on the difference between Star Wars and Ice Pirates, but even then I don't think I could put my finger on what the difference between them is, why one of them changed the culture and why the other one just didn't. But when you ring that bell like that, you're really connecting to people on a deep level, and that's why Star Wars becomes a franchise, and Star Trek, and all, Marvel, all of it, and these things become so popular and so widespread that the left realize they're a delivery system, that all we have to do is inject our message into the stuff that people are eating anyway. It's kind of like, we're just going to, inject some cyanide into some jelly donuts. People like jelly donuts. They don't like cyanide. But if you put some in there, then they'll take it and mission accomplished. Only it doesn't work that way. You can't put the cyanide in the jelly donut without it's tasting like a cyanide donut. And so people have just walked away from it. The Indiana Jones catastrophe, Crystal Skull was an abomination and embarrassing. That was 15 years ago. This thing is a certified flop, and everything that they do is a certified flop. The Little Mermaid's a certified flop. All of it is just plain not making money. I'm not going to get into the whole ESG thing and all the back end of that stuff, but just in terms of the movies, they have, in their enthusiasm to bash home the message, they have unmasked themselves, and the generation or two or three, or who am I kidding, more like 4 or 5 generations of left-wing writers who are actual writers, who are great writers. There aren't the conditions to make great writers are not here anymore, I'm not saying there aren't any great writers here. I'm saying there's a lot fewer of them than there was when I was a kid, and there's a lot fewer when I was a kid compared to people who went through actual real trauma, you know. So we have, of all the things about these woke movies, the thing that is so really astonishing to me, and I hear Drinker talking about this all the time, although I don't think he quite gets the political objective completely, is that it's really astonishing how little talent and ability these woke writers have. They really genuinely are. They're not even like a parasite or a leech or a remora, because those things, or a tick or a flea, those things stay on the body for a while, you know. They get to know their host. They basically become one with their host. These people just land on these properties. It's like, have you ever written Indiana Jones before? Nah. Do you know anything about the history of the character? He wears a hat and he's got a whip, right? So we'll just put some whip stuff in there and everybody will love it. And they just don't have a clue. And I'm not the only person to have noticed that these movies are being written by younger and produced and directed by younger and younger and younger people. And so when you have the inevitable consequence of a successful franchise and you want to just keep drinking the milk out of that forever, those characters are going to get older. And the people who are making the movies about old characters now, like Luke Skywalker and Harrison Ford, I don't mean old in the sense of played out, although there's certainly that. I mean people who are in their 60s, 70s, the case of Harrison Ford in his 80s, they don't know how to write old people. Their vision, just look at this last Harrison Ford movie, look at this last vision of Indiana Jones, and look at the last vision of Luke Skywalker, or the last vision of Blade Runner, which I admit is not a upbeat, peppy kind of thing. But all they see when they see people getting older, people just lonely, bitter, angry, life has passed them by, time for somebody their age, meaning in their 20s or whatever, to show them how to do it right, and the arrogance of this and the just the stupidity of it is overwhelming. And they really think that if it's got Indiana Jones, it's got the hat and stuff, then they'll just make a ton of money. But it's not. I think Blade Runner 2 is excellent. I like it too, Eric. It's just that Deckard doesn't end up particularly happy. And as I qualified that, Deckar's not exactly Indiana Jones, although I guess he is in a sense. But nevertheless, they don't know how to. They're handed icons, and they don't even. It's like they're handed like a brass genie bottle. They don't even rub the lamp, you know. And I just put up on the shelf, and so they just go through and destroying things. Now I did have a very interesting idea. It's not for me specifically, but just kind of culturally. I did not see Indiana Jones. I'm certainly not going to go see the Dial of Destiny. I'm not even interested in seeing clips. However, with the trailer everywhere and everybody talking about how awful the movie is, I got a chance to see a couple of frames from the trailer. And apparently in Dial of Destiny, it opens with Indiana Jones in the 40s, and they de-aged Harrison Ford. And I've heard people say there's moments when it's a little off, but generally speaking, it looks really good. The clips I saw, on the trailer were like, wow, okay. That's, I believe it. So what I'm getting at is everybody who loves Star Wars thinks that Star Wars is over. Everybody that loved Indiana Jones, everybody that loved, I'll just go down the list. But with this digital technology, with this deep fake, because de-aging essentially is deep fake, it occurred to me that we're there already, but it occurred to me that we are now at the point where fans could make a movie about Luke Skywalker being 50 or 60 years old, and they could use Mark Hamill's face. Now, I'm not going to deal with the legal issues or anything like that, but just think about it. It would be possible to make, it would be possible, in fact, by today's standards, relatively straightforward, to make the original series, Star Trek, the original series. The sets exist. There's one that's just incredible, and there's another one that's very good. But the one that Vic used on Star Trek Continues it's indistinguishable from the actual set used in 66 or 68. So just stick with me for a second here. If you had somebody like Vic, who was the right size and had the right mannerisms, you could not only deep fake Shatner's face onto this character, you could deep fake his voice, and again, you'd want somebody who knew Shatnerisms. But it's entirely within our grasp technologically to be able to make new episodes of Star Trek featuring William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, DeForest Kelley at the ages that they were in 1966. And when I realized that, I thought, man, I don't know. This raping of the culture that's been done, this destruction, deconstruction and destruction of Luke Skywalker and Indiana Jones, bitter guy, got a divorce, accused of murder apparently, nothing to do but stand around and look old and wait for the young British Supergirl, bestest ever wonder child to literally carry him. This little stick of a girl is carrying him around apparently, and okay, you can have your wish fulfillment, and people have voted with their wallets on what they think about your wish fulfillment. Nobody cares anymore, Kathleen Kennedy. We know that you got a lot of issues, and we know you're not happy that you had to make coffee, and we know your entire life is predicated on getting revenge on all these men for all the years that you had to live in the terrible squalor of the top levels of Hollywood filmmaking. And so, yes, you have ruined the official version of Star Wars. You've ruined the canonical Star Wars. You turned Luke Skywalker into an angry, bitter loser, murderer. And that was not accidental. You did that on purpose. And everybody grieved about it. But we are now very, very close to being able to say essentially, screw you, Kathleen Kennedy. The fans will make the continuing story of Luke Skywalker, and we'll just say that guy on the island just didn't exist. And it's easy. Just take away the beard, and you got a whole new Luke. And you can. Everybody was saying when the Force Awakens came out, oh man, we didn't. We had a chance to get Carrie Fisher, Harrison Ford, Mark Hamill on the same shot, and we didn't do it. And everybody was very sad about that. But we can do it now. And that opens up tremendous potential. I really looked at the de-aging of Harrison Ford and said to myself, we could make Indy. The problem with the trilogy, right? Indiana Jones trilogy is the trilogy. Crystal Skull doesn't count. Dial of Destiny doesn't count. Nobody wants to see it. They didn't want to see it 15 years ago, and they don't want to see it now. But you could make, at least theoretically, you could make more Indiana Jones movies that are set in the late 1930s or the early 40s. Because it's not a question of Harrison Ford getting too old anymore. And it's not even a question of getting a different actor, which is also not quite the same thing. Having looked at that de-aging thing and listening to where they're going with AI voices as well, I'm actually thinking I really might like to write like a definitive Star Trek original series episode. Just one, maybe. Go out and shoot that thing. And and just have Kirk, Spock, and McCoy be Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. And by the way, this Spock on Strange New Worlds, it's like I've never imagined. We've seen black Vulcans, we've seen women Vulcans, we've seen all kinds of different Vulcans, but we've never seen nerdy Vulcans before. But the guy who plays Spock on that is, to me, the biggest nothing burger that has ever walked the earth. I mean, at least Zachary Quinto had character. He had, there was something to him. This guy, it's like they had to shoot a scene, and there was a guy who was in craft services who was bringing the sandwiches around, and said, "Dude, we need you to step in here and be Mr. Spock. Can you do that?" Well, so there you go. But you could make all of them. You could do all of these things, and now you don't have to worry about the aging problem, because you're not going to try and, we got to make one more movie while Harrison Ford is still with us. And that brings up a different issue, and somewhat different issue. And this is something I've been aware of for quite a while now. I'm wondering when we're going to see the next movie starring Marilyn Monroe, because you have mediocre Vulcans, Infidel. When are we going to see the next movie that it's not a cameo by Marilyn Monroe? It's not like, oh look, here's a person playing Marilyn Monroe on a stage. I mean, we could do, right now, we could make a new movie starring Marilyn Monroe, because Marilyn Monroe is an image. It's an iconic image, but it's an image. Nobody watching this knew Marilyn Monroe, and I'm not entirely sure Marilyn Monroe knew Marilyn Monroe. But what makes Marilyn Monroe or Elvis or James Dean or any of these other icons? I mean, you really got to get down to the philosophy of it. All of these things are essentially they're just flat. They're just images on a flat screen. And so, while you could make a movie right now starring Marilyn Monroe, and certainly within the next few years at the latest, be absolutely indistinguishable from her just walking out of the makeup room in 1964. The question is there anybody who could write a Marilyn Monroe movie? Because what Marilyn Monroe is this it's like a mythological ideal, and Marilyn Monroe has her own rules. If you were to make a new Marilyn Monroe movie with the technology, the writer would have to know what the rules are for Marilyn Monroe, and if they didn't, and that's going to likely be the case, they're not going to have any idea. They're going to probably make her into a swearing, tattooed, ass-kicking warrior. That's probably what they'll do. But that's not Marilyn Monroe. They would have to, and Quibo says that they'd have to make her. I'm sorry. Said that Hollywood have to make her modern looking. I think if you make Marilyn Monroe modern looking, it's not Marilyn Monroe anymore. I really just can't imagine it. So we have an incredible frontier of technology that is just now beginning to sink into me anyway, in terms of not what we can do technically, but what we can do culturally. Eric Blake says Marilyn herself laid it out for a journalist one time. They were walking down the street, and she pointed out that no one seemed to be noticing them. Now watch this. She started the walk, and just like that, people walking by started double taking and going, is that, oh my God, that is, yeah. And the same thing for Captain Kirk and all the rest of it. So anyway, I just think it's good news, because I don't want my final image of Luke Skywalker to be, you know, just disappearing off a rock on an island someplace. And when they brought Luke back, and technology's improved quite a lot since then, but when they brought Luke back for Mandalorian, people went bat guano crazy over it because they realized, wait a minute, we could make as many movies about Luke Skywalker as we really wanted to. And I mean like Luke Skywalker. What's even more interesting than that is, since you can de-age characters and age them digitally, once you've got the basics of Mark Hamill's face, you could make movies about Luke Skywalker as a 100-year-old man. You could make a movie about Luke Skywalker as a 14-year-old boy. And it would look exactly like Mark Hamill every time. You wouldn't have to do that kind of, okay, I'm going to pretend that, that Chris Pine is actually Captain Kirk. No, I don't have to pretend I'm going to get William Shatner to do it. And then somebody mentioned R. Lee Ermey. He'd be fun to bring back. It almost sounds a bit like, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but there'd be something to this idea of having a movie that was just about the icons, a bit like Ready Player One, except entertaining. Anyway, I hope that helped. So Ray was kind enough to say, don't do any others until you come back. So we'll do that. Okay, so from Chris Taylor, sorry I was on vacation for the Dyson sphere discussion. We talked about Dyson spheres and how much material it would take and all the rest of it. The usual proposed purpose for a Dyson sphere or swarm is to maximize the solar energy collection from the star, which does not require nearly the same mass as constructing a giant inside-out pseudoplanet. Using only the metal contained in Mercury, you could make a thin reflector a couple of thousandths of an inch thick at 1 astronomical unit radius, thicker than even current solar reflector technology. It's an interesting point. In practice, it would not be one piece for orbital mechanic reasons, and I personally think that solar power sats should be as close to the sun as the material properties permit and beam the power back to Earth by a laser to take advantage of the inverse square law. All agreed on all this. The high-power long-range lasers would also be useful for planetary defense, pushing light sails, etc. That's also very interesting. Extreme inter-system power satellites might make interesting infrastructure defense facilities for the colonies. Reaching them might be hard due to the need to kill so much delta V going that deep into the well, and then the fact that they could use the constant radiation pressure on their collectors to orbit at velocities slower than normal for their orbital radius. My God, man, this is really wonderful. With their huge laser emitter diameters, they could easily outrange any ship-mounted laser, except possibly a coordinated swarm operating as a phased array, or someone using a gravity lens somehow. Well, damn, man, that was about as epic a science fiction question as ever been asked. Also, the easier place to get the mass for a Dyson sphere may be mine the largest deposit of metal in the solar system, the sun. There's an interesting paper in 2017 on star mining that wouldn't be outside a near our Kardashev 1 civilization capability by G.L. Matloff, and here's a link. I will mine the sun to build our Dyson sphere. There's certainly enough matter in the sun to do that. Here's the question I have about this, though. It was an extraordinarily enlightening question. Really, really interesting and deep question. My question is, what do you need that kind of energy for? I mean, I just, certainly by that point, you would think you could just put a reactor wherever you needed it, or as many as you needed. I understand that's not going to match the output of the sun. And I know also this whole science fiction thing about, well, this is a, if you're, there's a galactic level civilization. There's a level of civilization where you, these names you mentioned, I've never been a big fan of them. But what do you do with all of that? That's not the kind of project you would do to keep running your air conditioning. What now? I suppose it's possible that you would need that much energy to open wormholes and all the rest of it. I just find the idea to be something that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me personally. I'm not saying the physics is wrong. I'm not saying that the idea is invalid. I'm just saying operationally, I just don't know what you could possibly need that you couldn't get much easier for that kind of energy. And this is when people will say, well, we have no idea how much energy that kind of a super advanced society needs. Maybe, but maybe they're able to build machines that run on body heat, right? I mean, we don't really know. There's a lot of ideas that are interesting philosophical ideas, and they become great science fiction ideas because they appeal to us. But when you try to think about them practically, everybody thinks about how practically you mean like building one. I mean, practically, like, why would you build one? What could you do with that much energy? What would you possibly need it for? Now, I understand this could be very much like somebody saying in the 1810s or something, my God, man, you're talking about a 1 megawatt electrical plant. That's enough energy for the rest of the planet for the rest of the time. I understand that. But generally speaking, the more advanced the technology gets, the less energy it uses, although the tech multiplies faster than the reduction. So I'm just trying to think what I would do with that kind of unlimited energy, and I can't think of anything. Sad Wings Raging in YouTube says, my favorite is the space elevator, as if that wouldn't wobble the Earth off its axis and disturb the planet. I think the space elevator's mass is so insignificant compared to the mass of the Earth. I don't think there's much chance of destabilizing the Earth's rotation. And on the contrary to the Dyson sphere, space elevator is a real good idea. I don't think people fully understand how much time it would take. I mean, 60 miles, 70 miles, let's say. You probably could do it in under an hour. What happens to, I guess, what happens to your body weight when you're riding a space elevator? I guess as you move along the radius, so if the space elevator itself is the radius to the departure point, and as you move along that radius is rotating with the Earth, so the further out you go on that space elevator radius, the more circular energy and speed you have, because they talk about tethered asteroids because you need something on, but you're still presumably could get off of the top of a space elevator, walk out the door, and just float in orbit, right? That gets you to orbit. So where does that acceleration come from? Am I missing something here? Let's just think this through. I get in a space elevator, got it, and it's built in carbon fiber, nanofibers, got it. And it's got a little car that goes from ground level up to, let's say, for the sake of it, the orbit of the space station, so 17,000 miles an hour. My physical body, relative to the surface of the planet, is 0. But once I get higher and higher and higher, I will be at the departure end. I should be, well, if it's going to be in orbit, I'm going to have to pick up 16,500 miles an hour of velocity. So, has anybody done the numbers on this? Has anybody thought about this? I'm not saying I'm like the first to think about it, but I've never heard anybody talk about it before. Because you just get in the elevator, you go up, right? Everybody has an elevator experience that they can talk about. I get in, push up. This time it's just a really, really tall elevator. But you have to come out with orbital velocity. You got to be going 17,000 miles an hour at the other end of that. Huh. That's an interesting thought. I'm sure there's a much simpler explanation. Bart's Treasure said space elevators, your body weight would drop to zero as you get to the top. But zero gravity is not the absence of gravity. It's an object at the space station isn't at zero G because it's out of the reach of the pull of the Earth. It's at zero G because it's in free fall around the Earth. It's not, you don't get weightless because you get further away from the Earth. You get weightless because you move fast enough to keep falling over the edge of the Earth. You're in a state of perpetual fall. So, for this thing to be useful, the top of it has to be in some orbit. Let's just say a 17,000 mile an hour orbit, whatever that height is. You load your junk on the bottom, you take it up to the top, push it off onto a spacecraft, it fires its rockets, and off it goes. So how does that crate pick up 17,000 miles an hour of energy? I understand I understand where it would get it. It's not that I don't understand it. I know that as it goes further and further up the elevator, it's taking more and more and more radial component. But has anybody ever done the math on this? Because it seems to me like you would be pinned against the trailing edge of that space elevator. Now, this is not my strong suit, so I might be completely wrong, but I haven't heard anybody talk about that. Hey, we have a first-time chat from somebody with a pale from Vector Death. Well, okay. Even with the low temps of 70 degrees, we are getting hit by waves from space that heat metal and humans. For example, 70-degree day, but the car door burns you when you touch it. We're being hit by some type of different wave from space right now. Could be a supernova from tens of thousands of years ago, and just reaching the Earth now would be nice to know. Yeah, I think most of the temperature and radiation that's hitting the Earth is coming from the sun, but there's that constant discussion about what happens if Betelgeuse goes supernova. I don't think we're in fatal range of it, but that's another thing to find yourself not worrying about, because it's not really too much you can do about that. Just checking here before we move on. Dave Big Booty says the ISS would move at 17,000 miles per hour relative to the space elevator. Then what's the point of the space elevator? Yeah, Air Techie says it's a giant lever. It's like a throwing stick, essentially. Something to think about. Okay, I had not really thought about that too much. And let's see, moving on. Marusha Dark, a tip for getting over depression. Oh, hooray. Hey, Bill, I hope this post finds you in better spirits than last week. Probably not. No question from me, but I did want to share a tip with you in case you ever find yourself in a dark place again and can't get yourself out. Managed to do it so far, but I'm take all the advice I can get. It's something I learned years ago, which is to try to stop doing whatever you're doing as soon as you become aware of the situation and put on a motivating or uplifting piece of music. Yes. This is more than just a psychological trick. The vibrations actually have a physiological impact on your body as well, getting your heart rate up, blood flowing, and leading to holistic healing. It might make a couple of songs before you begin to feel the effect, but definitely has to be something that's personally meaningful to you. I find it works just about every time. Some of my go-tos are Burning Heart, Danger Zone, Eye of the Tiger, or Testo's The Business if you need recommendations. Also food. Food always helps for much the same reason. Happy 4th of May. Live long and prosper. Maru, thank you very much. That's very, very kind of you. So all of it, the advice and the sentiment behind it. Yes. Playing the kind of music that I used to like really does get my blood pressure and my mood up. But I think the thing for me that has proven to be the most effective non-medicinal weapon is the comedy, just the YouTube comedy. For example, I can't remember honestly if it was last night or the night before, but it was no longer ago than that. I've become convinced that the funniest man who ever lived. I think John Cleese is the second funniest man alive. I think the funniest man alive is Paul Whitehouse. I genuinely think he's the funniest man.